It's finally here, the Leica Q3. Leica took what started as a more simple and an introduction camera to the Leica family and made it better. Again, and now again for the second time. So, the Leica Q3 is the third generation of the Q family, and last week I got the chance to test out the camera during a trip to Paris. And they haven't changed that much on this camera compared to previous generation, and that is made on purpose. Leica rarely change much on their newer cameras and newer generation. Instead, they make it good in the first place. Pretty much like the Porsche 911. It looks pretty similar today, like it did back in the 60s. If you make a good design, it will last. As always, the Leica colors are there, the sharpness, the contrast, the blacks in the photo. And quickly when you start working in the editing process, you will notice pretty soon that you don't need to spend as much time as you would with some other files from other cameras. And I think what comes out straight from the camera is very good, so you don't need to play around too much with it in editing. And the lens of this camera, it's a fixed 28mm lens. This focal length actually started to become my favorite focal length. It's good for landscape, portrait, street photography, and just every day-to-day photography, I would say. It sits just in the middle of everything, and it works great on a camera like this that should be easy to carry around and should be a camera that you can use on a daily basis. So here are some photos that I took in Paris. And let's start it off with some classical photos of the Eiffel Tower. It was very nice architecture in Paris, so wherever I was walking around, it was great for photography. And I think this is what the Q camera is made for. It should be simple, just walk around, take nice shots, and it should not be too complex. It should be an easy camera to play around with. The weather was good in Paris, so I got some pretty decent photos out in the golden hour. There's a lot of photos in here of just architecture, houses and buildings and so on. But I think it's very cool when you come to a new place. I've never been to Paris before, so for me, that's something that stood out. And yeah, I enjoy just walking around and taking simple photos of streets, buildings, cars, whatever I can find along the way. And also later at night, I went to the classic Triumph something. And later at night, I tried to play around with the shutter speed a bit also. I went down to like 30 of a second or 60 of a second, just to give photos something extra. And I also think this camera is pretty decent in low light. I mean, it's not a low light camera and it's not great for it, but I think you can push it a bit with bringing up the ISO, and I think I like the noise that comes out from the shadows. Yeah, overall the contrast and the blacks in the shadow just looks good, and most of the time you can push the ISO more than you think. For all these photos, I made a pretty simple edit. I took one edit and then just applied it to all of the photos almost, and then just tweaked a little bit. But for all these photos, I probably didn't spend more than 15-20 minutes. Alright, so here's the cliffhanger of this video. This camera is not the Leica Q3. This is actually the first Q that came out 8 years ago. Did you see any difference in the photos I just showed you? Was the quality not that good? Was the colors not on point? Was the blacks not there? At least I didn't, and that's the point of this video. With newer version coming out on the market, I think it's a great opportunity to buy used cameras for a great price, and you will still get the Leica camera with the Leica look. If this camera was good for photography 8 years ago, I would say that it's definitely good for photography today as well. And the film aspect of this camera has probably been much better over these two last generation. But for me personally, I use this camera mostly for photography. And I think the photography side is difficult to make much better all the time. I mean, you can make the resolution and the pixels better, but that's about it. So you can buy a used Leica Q first generation here in Sweden for around $2,500. And the new Leica Q3 costs around $6,500. So that's a massive difference, I would say. I haven't tried out the Leica Q3, but if you like, I want to send it to me, please go ahead. But I must say that with this price tag that is just going higher and higher, I think I first bought this at around $4,000. And now the new Leica Q3 costs $6,500. I think this camera, it starts to wander away from this entry-level Leica camera and a camera that you can use on a daily basis, which was the purpose with this camera in the beginning. So yes, this is my input on the camera market. I buy used cameras myself. I recently just bought this one, the Leica SL first generation as well. And so far I'm starting to enjoy this camera more and more. And in terms of the price for this one, a used camera, around $2,000, I think it's hard to beat. And that's a wrap. Subscribe for more Leica videos, and you should check out some other videos here on the channel around photography and filmmaking. And I will see you in another video. Goodbye.